Welcome to another Wisdom for Life. I'm here with AnnMarie Duggan, Senior Learning and Development Consultant, and we're talking today about allowing mistakes to happen. So, AnnMarie, welcome. For a number of reasons, the workplace is changing pretty rapidly. Can you explain why this means more autonomy and what this potentially means for leaders?
Over the past few years, there's been a real big increase of working remotely, matrix management, working globally, and other crises and situations that mean that we're not always working alongside our teams as leaders. And this means that leaders have to give much more autonomy and empower and trust people to get on with things.
This getting on with things basically means that potentially we're allowing or creating an environment in which mistakes can happen. What sort of things should we as leaders at least be putting in place to, mitigate or to make sure this happens in a safe way?
Listen and understand the mistakes. Firstly, is what's happened. Understand why the mistake has happened, and most importantly, understand the learning from those mistakes. What can we do differently next time? As a leader, I've always said we can't erase that mistake. We can learn from it. So let's not look backwards, let's look forward.
Are there some specific steps we should be taking as leaders to make sure that can happen on a sort of ongoing basis?
I think there's 5 steps in learning from our mistakes. Firstly, reviewing the objectives. What are we trying to achieve? Then look at what we actually have achieved to date. What was the outcome? What did we actually achieve? And then look at the discrepancies, to look at the difference between what was expected and what has actually happened. Then you can start to see and create that list of the mistakes without attributing blame or responsibility, but just a clear list of the things that went wrong, the things that weren't achieved. That then allows us to focus on the lessons that we need to learn, being really clear that we can identify what the errors were, what we've learned from it, so as to not repeat the same mistakes, and also to identify the learning that needs to take place, or the support or the skills or the knowledge that might be required to prevent those mistakes from happening in the future.
When you've spoken through those steps there, AnnMarie, it struck me that obviously we're focusing on those mistakes to ensure that we recognise and prevent them happening again. But is there a place within that for celebrating things that went well, or is that a completely separate sort of process?
I think there is. I think, here we're talking about allowing mistakes to happen, but it's getting that balance. So, okay, that didn't work well, but what did work well? What did we do well? So that you do get that balance and don't just focus on the things that went wrong. We do need to understand why things went wrong to prevent them from happening in the future.
So the sort of celebrating where things went well are part of that 5th step in terms of learning the lessons, I guess.
Learn the lessons. What did we do well? What could we do differently next time?
When mistakes start to happen, or if mistakes are happening, or if we're going through this process, what's the role for the leader of communication in managing that and making sure that we are going through and learning the lessons we need to learn?
Firstly, we need to evaluate what's going wrong. We might need to see if it's critical. So, we've got to take that very quick understanding of, is this mistake happening? Is it ongoing? Is it critical? Do I need to intervene if somebody's doing something that puts themselves at risk or other people at risk? But in many situations, we get to the end of what's happened, and we can then explore what's happened, what we've learnt from this, and how this will impact what we will do differently next time.
Could you make the sort of distinction for us between allowing mistakes to happen but not, or avoiding the same mistakes happening?
Allowing mistakes happen and find the learning in that mistake is very different from allowing mistakes to happen without trying to understand why and prevent them from happening again. So, for example, an employee who always leaves out information in a report, but that error is never discussed. It's never explored. And if it was explored and identified, you might be able to realise that they didn't know the importance of the things that they're not including in that report, but they may also think that the form could be improved to make it more effective and easier to complete. So by not just ignoring this mistake, allowing it to happen time and time again, by taking time to explore it and to understand why it's happened, you actually may then improve the whole process.
And that improving of the whole process, that I get is part of this growth sort of component of this whole situation. Could you explain a little bit more about that, AnnMarie, in terms of how this is tied up with us growing as, I guess, individuals and teams?
We can have a fixed mindset, which is, I can't do this. I always make mistakes. I don't know how to do this. And we won't grow. Whereas if we think about this growth mindset of which is, I can't do this yet. I don't know how to complete that form yet because I don't understand the importance of each element of that form. But then what do I need to know? Who do I need to speak to understand where that form goes, why that form was created, what that information required? That allows me to grow as an individual or as a team. I can then say, well, I think there's a better way to do this form. So therefore we can, as a team, we can grow and we can develop.
AnnMarie, when we talk about a lot of this stuff, it strikes me that there's a bit of a balance to be struck between sort of allowing creativity to happen, but also making sure that our team are safe and in a safe environment. What's your perspective on that? How does that work? What's the sort of best approach to strike that balance?
I think, for us as organisations to grow, to be competitive, to be fit for purpose in the future, we've got to constantly look at new ways of doing things. By doing that, by the nature of that, there will be mistakes, that things will go wrong. As a leader, we've got to create an environment for people to test these things out that's a safe environment. So, for example, in my world of learning and development, when we want to perhaps run a session, create a workshop or a training course that's different, using new content, using new learning mediums, we run a pilot. So we've set that safety net around it. People who are attending on the pilot know that it's a pilot. They know that we're going to seek their feedback at the end. They know that the outcomes of that pilot will inform what we do going forward, so that nobody feels exposed or threatens, that the facilitators can run the session knowing that it's in the safety net is there, that it's very clearly been ring fenced as a learning opportunity, and acknowledge that things may not work correctly the first time, but that we've created that opportunity to identify how we overcome anything that could potentially go wrong. For example, we might be bringing in participants from 4 different countries, and we're using various technology platforms to do that. But actually, the challenge might be that bringing in certain countries, there's going to be a time lag and it might not work. That allows us to say, okay, it didn't work, but what can we learn from that? What could we do differently? Could we refocus on the technology? Could we use different technology?
And at the very beginning of this conversation, you mentioned we discussed that virtual working is happening more and more. Is the virtual workplace, or people working remotely, does that actually offer a great opportunity as leaders to start to investigate this allowing mistakes to happen culture?
I think it does. I think that working virtually, we're all experiencing different ways of happening. People will make mistakes. Some people won't have the technical ability to do what they need to do. The important thing is that channel of communication. So one of the things working more virtually as a leader, we have to make sure that we are providing those opportunities to talk to people more, using a coaching approach to understand what they're doing, what has worked, what hasn't worked, so that we can identify if things have gone wrong, give that opportunity for those conversations to happen.
That's great. Thanks very much, AnnMarie.
Thank you.